Nick, thanks for joining us this morning. We just thought it'd be a great opportunity to catch up with you to discuss the current situation on and off the field, really. With the club going through quite a difficult period, there's obviously a lot of questions coming in from supporters online and at the stadium. So we just thought we'd run through some of those with you just so you can fill people in on what the club is doing behind the scenes.
Of course, yeah.
I guess first of all, could you just explain a little bit about why you're happy to do this?
I'm fortunate to chair the club and the trust board, and the trust board is really important. The trust members are important to us, and as a supporter-owned club, people should be informed. It can be quite difficult sometimes because the club is full of moving parts, and waiting for one piece to finish and another piece to start, so that you build a picture that's worth talking about, can be challenging. We're in a slightly different place today than we were those weeks when we done a communication around putting money on the table in January. So it's right and proper that I answer the questions you've got.
I guess the key question most people have at the moment is that why are the club still backing Gary as our manager?
Gary comes to every board meeting without fail. I'm astonished by his honesty and his integrity, and that shines through not just in the board meetings but in other areas of interaction. I see the atmosphere and what's going on at the training ground. I've spent a lot of time out there during November and this month. I was there till quite late last night. At the moment, we understand, both boards, club and trust, understand why we're in this situation. We know what we're doing to alleviate it. We've gone too long without a win now, and hence we need to say these things to the supporters, but we to try and be a little more patient because we do believe that it will turn around.
And what are the club and trust boards doing to support Gary and alleviate the situation we're currently in?
So putting money on the table in January is the obvious thing. The club are in a fantastic financial state, so the amount of money we've been able to put on the table is unprecedented, certainly in my time at the club, and we're confident it will make a difference. Alongside that, we'll be looking at any other areas that we can strengthen. So it doesn't have to be just players. It can be support staff if more are needed, and just being around. We have a lot of dialogue with Gary day in, day out. As I said, I was there late last night. We go to recruitment meetings. We see what's going on. We see the efforts that are being made to turn things around. So it's impossible not to be enthusiastic about that, even though it doesn't feel like it. And I sit in the stand here and watch games, and I feel sick at the end of them because you haven't quite got those 3 points, but I'm confident that we will get there.
I think as a fan, when you look at football as a whole and news in football, over the last couple of weeks, 4 or 5 managers have been sacked by their clubs, and they've had better current records than we're on. I mean, yeah. I guess for them, the fans would just want to understand, how that kind of thing works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to copy other clubs, to be honest, and you don't know. I think it's important that if we judge things on what happens over 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon, you miss a whole load of other stuff that's going on. So you never know what's happening at those other clubs who are dismissing their managers. It might be about far more than just the results. We don't know that. What I do know is that at Exeter City, the players are absolutely behind the manager, and that's probably the single most important thing, and that might not be the case at other clubs.
Definitely. There's always been a bit of hearsay over the years that it's been said that we can't afford to sack a manager. Is that true?
That's completely untrue. You often see comments about the club can afford this, the club can afford that, and I don't really know where that information emanates from. We're absolutely fine if we had to dismiss anybody. We can. It would be the height of irresponsibility to recruit somebody and then not be able to not be able to dismiss them if we needed to. So that's not true.
And at Exeter City, who makes that decision to sack the manager?
So again, this is where we're quite different from other clubs. So there isn't one individual who would say, I've had enough, and that's a good thing, because personalities don't come into the argument. What would happen at Exeter City is that the club board would be responsible for making that decision collaboratively. There are 6 people on the board who vote on issues such as that. 3 of them non-execs who are independent, and 3 people appointed by the trust. So it doesn't require trust board consent, but inevitably is given through those representatives on the board. And that's how we would do it. It's a democratic process based on the information that we have to our hands.
You touched on it briefly just now, but do the players still want to play for Gary?
Yeah, so throughout November and in December, I've spent a lot of time at the training ground, attending meetings, sat with the players, having lunch. We were there last night. Both myself and other directors and trustees have been out. If there's a problem out there, they're great actors. I think they're genuinely behind the manager. The interaction between the players and the manager is really good. I don't see any problem at all.
Pattern of losses that we're in at the moment reflects similar patterns at other clubs that Gary's managed. Is that a concern?
I don't think it is. You have to judge everything on your own criteria, and whatever manager we recruit, they will have been sacked at some point, probably by multiple clubs. That's I read somewhere the one thing that every football manager knows is they're going to be sacked at some point. So I don't think that's necessarily a concern. It's not something that we dwell on.
And looking forward, I guess what is the long-term plan for Exeter City Football Club?
We're in a great position at the moment. We tend to plan 3 years. We always have contingencies. The important thing, and it feels quite wrong saying this in this particular interview, but we certainly plan to be competitive in League Two should the worst come to the worst. But we were doing that anyway, so that's not something that we've suddenly decided to do. We always look at what happens if we go up, because that's one set of challenges. What do we need to do next season if we stay where we are? And if we get relegated, then let's make sure that we remain competitive in that league and not do a Forest Green, for example.
Part of that plan comes into action in January. You've said a bit about it, but what are the plans for supporting that improvement in the playing squad in January?
You don't want me interfering in that process, to be honest. But we put a significant sum of money on the table. So they need to be really guarded, because there are contract negotiations going on at the moment. We're talking to agents, and I'm sure our agents will be talking to us. So we're happy that we've done everything the club can possibly do. I
guess a few questions about the summer transfer window. I guess. I mean, how did we come to not have, start the season without a recognised, say, number 9 in the squad?
Yes, there was one that I know we were pursuing. We couldn't prize them away from their host club. The problem with the type of player that we're talking about is that there are 71 other clubs who all want the same player, and we do have to compete. Sometimes you have to compete on finances, and I know not this season, but in previous seasons, we've offered more money to players than they actually accepted to move to another club, because they're closer to home. They don't have to move their family, they don't have to move the kids. They stay within their support network, and they go home every night after training. Typically, that's not the case when people come to us. So that's definitely a consideration across all the positions, actually. But when you're fishing in a particularly small pond of opportunities, there aren't loads and loads of people who can score goals. What we've been really good at in the past, and if you think about Giovanni, if you think about Sam, if you think about Dayton Stockley, they came to us with, and they were struggling at the clubs that they were in, but to get a game, to recover from injury. We do that really well. It hasn't maybe not working out as well as we had hoped on this occasion.
And I guess injuries have made this more prevalent, but I mean, how do we come into the start of the season light on numbers, and then, because obviously that's contributed to the situation we find ourselves in? Was that budgetary, or was that?
I think it's a bit of both. You can. The biggest problem that we had is right at the start is losing so many people. We weren't strengthening a team; we were building a team, and that's so. If you choose to just bring players in based on the number of players, and some clubs in this league have done that. Do you get the best team? I don't know. We tried to be really selective. I know Gary tried to be really selective to get the right people in who could make a challenge. I think that, and some budgetary constraints, because we don't have the smallest budget in the league, but we certainly don't have the biggest either. So you're trying to get the right level of quality and the right character into the club is always a challenge. Is always a challenge.
I guess one thing that's caused a little bit of confusion around the fan base is Czech Deat being put in as a makeshift forward when we've got other options in that area on the bench.
I think. I mean, there's an argument that says James Scott is playing out of position. I think we needed to try something different and take our opposition by surprise, because at that point, we did need some points on the board. So any advantage that we could gain was we were going to try.
Crowds have started to fall a bit, obviously, which is understandable due to the run that we're on. I mean, how do we get people to believe and come back?
I think we've got incredibly resilient fans. It is bad at the moment. Completely understand their feelings. I even understand the kind of reactions at the end of games. We just need to get back to winning games. There isn't anybody at the club, and you know yourself, Scott. When you're losing, it's miserable. When you're winning, it's pretty good. I think we'll get them back. I think it's true that it will take us longer to get them back than it does to lose them. But we just have to win football matches. That's all we can do.
A lot of people suggested that things, went wrong after we lost Sam Nombe quite late in the window. I mean, what happened around Sam leaving the club?
We were getting offers for Sam all summer. We turned them down. They were largely from clubs in our league. The moment I think that Rotherham came in, and the opportunity for Sam to play at a higher level and to get back playing for Matt Taylor was appealing for him. I completely understand why he wanted to leave. It's not always a case of us selling players. Sometimes it's a case of the players wanting a different opportunity and a different challenge, and that's certainly the case with Sam.
I mean, if the worst does happen and we do end up being relegated this season, how would the club recover? And I guess there are, as you say, we always plan for the future, so there are best, worst, and that case scenarios in place.
Yeah, so we're as a club, and it's important because all of these things do fit together. As a club, we're doing brilliantly. I think we're one of the 3 most sustainable clubs in the country. I think one of the other ones is Plymouth Argyle, but we're planning to be ambitious and aspirational. We know that we can compete next year with a decent playing budget. We're going to make changes to the ground to increase our revenue generation possibilities, which will further increase our ability to tackle our spending ability in the transfer market and getting players in. So we're moving in the right direction at the speed at which is sensible and safe to do. So we're in a fantastic place. We just need to win the game, and we know that everybody is together in that. I know that you've had a team brief this week, and the same team brief has happened at the training ground. there's still a healthy buzz about the place. But we'll turn it around, get those 3 points, and hopefully take off again.
When you look at the season as a whole, you know, those first 2 months were fantastic, and it shows. And if you look at the EFL Cup run, it shows what these players can achieve. I mean, Gary said it a lot, that, you know, you don't become a bad player overnight, so they know that what they can achieve, and it's very much about just getting back to that. It is,
and who knows what that secret ingredient is, and it's what we've been looking at. Why it's not just about the players, it's about everybody around them, and it's no criticism. I know how hard people are working, the additional hours they're working, the commitment that they have to the club, both here at St James Park and at the training ground. There's no lack of effort, and I don't believe there's any lack of skill. But anything we can do to enhance that, you know, we're happy to do, and we're ready to do, and we have the finances to do.
One thing I guess we should be honest about is that, I mean, why has there been a lack of communication from the club? I mean, we had a couple of statements that went out, but I guess we could have kind of informed people a bit more about.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier, I think we did fall into the trap of, it hasn't been good enough. I'll say that right up front, because we talked about it, and we said, we need to say something. But it always felt like we were waiting for one thing to finish or waiting for something to start before we could say, here's the real evidence that this problem is being tackled. And we never quite got to that point where there was something really tangible to say. You know, with hindsight, yeah, I think we would have chosen to have done it differently.
I guess finally as well, this year we celebrate 20 years of supporter ownership, and the fans just, you know, for this club have done incredible things over those 20 years. And I guess, do you have a kind of a message for them, just to kind of, like, you know, stick with us, and once we do get back to winning ways, you know?
Yeah, we've been, I've been coming since 1969. People are fed up with me saying that, but I've experienced much worse than this, frankly. If you've been at the club when you had to apply for re-election to even stay in the league, it wasn't about getting relegated, it was about every other club voting to keep you in the league. They were pretty horrible times. We've had periods in our history where it's been far, far worse. The fans make this club. We are supporter owned, and we're actually a very pure version of supporter ownership. So everybody who comes to the stadium has a part to play in making the team successful, and I think they do that week in, week out. And I have to say how impressed you can't fail to be impressed by the fact that throughout the 90 minutes last week there's very little negativity, and yeah, there's a bit at the end, and you understand that because you've lost the game. But I think I hope appeal to the supporters, stick behind the team, because the negativity really doesn't help. We're doing everything we can. It's not always visible. It's not always tangible. It's not always evident that we're doing that. And I'm sure people think, you know, match days, we sit up here drinking glasses of wine. I personally don't. I don't think any of the other people do. We're all as concerned as the supporters are, and all working our socks off to turn it around.